During the summer of 2003, events in the northern United States involved a strange human-like creature sparked brief local media interest before an apparent blackout was enacted. Little or no information was left intact, as most online and written accounts of the creature were mysteriously destroyed. Primary focus in rural New York State and once found in Idaho, self-proclaimed witnesses told stories of their encounters with a creature of unknown origin. Emotions range from extremely traumatic levels of fright and discomfort to an almost childlike sense of playfulness and curiosity. While their published versions are no longer on record, the memories remain powerful. Several of the involved parties began looking for answers that year. In early 2006, collaboration had accumulated nearly 24 documents dating between the 12th century and the present day, spanning 4 continents. In almost all cases, the stories were identical. I've been in contact with a member of this group and was able to get some experts from the upcoming book. A Suicide Note, 1964. As I prepare to take my life, I feel necessary to acknowledge I am guilty or pain I have introduced this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him. For once I awoke and felt his presence, and once I awoke and saw his form. Once again I awoke and heard his voice, and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might next awake to experience. I can never awake. Goodbye. Found in the same wooden box were 2 empty envelopes addressed to William Rose, and 1 loose personal letter with no envelope. Dearest Lenny, I prayed for you. He spoke your name. A journal entry, translated from Spanish, 1880. I've experienced the greatest terror. I've experienced the greatest terror. I've experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow, black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand. I would not sleep. His voice. A Mariner's Log, 1691. He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again at the request of the Rake. From a Witness, 2006. 3 years ago, I just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving, so my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 a.m., I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the restroom. I used the moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him though he got out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly his knees almost knocked me out of the bed. He then grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for a half second, I was able to see what caused a strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man, or a large hairless dog of some sort. Its body positioned was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the astonishment that we were supposed to help it. My husband drove his car into a lake that night. While rushing our daughter to the hospital, they did not survive. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story, who got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature, we now referred to as the Rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be accounts of the Rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-ups. One journal had an entry involving the creature in its first 3 pages and never mentioned it again. A ship log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the Rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of the series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us wonder if the Rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital record near my bed and left it running all night, every night for 2 weeks. I would tenaciously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the 2nd week, I was quite quite used to occasionally sound or sleep while blurring through the records at 8 times in normal speed. It still took almost an hour every day. On the first day of the third week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the Rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it yet. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head make me very upset. I've not seen the Rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I slept. I know with fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me.